Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Vasu Janopoulos, Acting Deputy Director of Education at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. We're delighted to be celebrating National Design Month. An enormous thank you to Target for making National Design Month possible. And thanks to all of you for being part of today's Design Salon, focusing on social impact. Each year, I have the pleasure of working closely with our National Design Award winners, and I'm so excited to have with us 3 of our 2020 winners who are redefining what it means to design today. Abrima Erwiah of Studio 189, Angela Hariche of Catapult Design, and Aziz Hasan of Kickstarter. Congratulations again. We'll drop a link in the chat to the award ceremony if you missed it. We also invite you to use the chat box to engage with each other around the conversation today. We'll pause at the end of the hour for questions. Please add those to the Q&A box and we'll get to as many as possible at the end of the program. I'm now pleased to introduce our moderator, Angela Brooks, principal of the Los Angeles-based firm Brooks & Scarpa, our 2014 National Design Award winner for architecture. Angie is a recognized leader in the field of environmental and social equity design and with an emphasis on affordable housing and sustainability. Angie also served on the 2020 National Design Awards jury, who selected our remarkable winners, and I know she's eager to get the conversation started. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you, Vaso. I'm here with the 3 winners from 3 very different industries, but who have a lot in common. And the question this panel will attempt to answer is, how can designers change the paradigm to amplify creative work and through design solve local and global challenges and actually drive social change? Basically, improve the quality of life for everyone through design. To give a little bit of context, because this is a panel on social impact, I would be remiss if I didn't state that the US is currently the world's largest economy by GDP, and per a RAND study that just was published in Fast Company in September of this year, in the US, there's been a massive income shift to the top 1%, and about 10% globally live in extreme poverty. So we're gonna kickstart the presentations with Kickstarter, who was awarded the Design Visionary Award. Aziz Hasan is with us. And Kickstarter is all about creatives from all walks of life who want to bring a creative project to life. Virtually any creative project, the sky's the limit. Art, design, technology, theater, games, food. Kickstarter is a very powerful tool that lets creatives take their ideas directly to the public. Its first project in 2009 raised $35 from 3 people. Since then, over 17 million people have pledged almost $5 billion to fund creative projects. It's an amazing tool. So I'm going to turn it over to Aziz, who's going to share his screen and present.
All right, thank you so much, Angie. Let me just pull this up. All right, can all see my screen all right?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. So I'm Aziz Hasan, the CEO of Kickstarter. And as Angie mentioned, we're a funding platform for creative projects. And so this, spreads the gamut from film to games to music, art, design, technology. And I think what we're always excited to see is just how much innovation and imaginative ideas actually come to life on the platform, but are being supported by people all over the world. Our mission is quite simple, right? We are here to help bring creative projects to life. And since 2009, when we launched, we've been excited that we've become such a critical part of funding creative projects. We're entering our 12th year pretty soon. And, again, as Angie mentioned, 18 million people have actually come together to support projects. That's crazy. We're almost hitting 200,000 creative projects that we've been able to touch. And this is just what we do at our core. Every project is a story that demonstrates in its own way why creative work is so essential. And every single one of them is really important. Every single project actually potentially creates a moment of transformation for the creator, for the backer, and for culture on whole. I want to share just a couple projects that more recently have demonstrated that. This year, the founders of Fix the Mask actually left their day jobs at Apple to work on this project during quarantine. They developed a brace that fit around the disposable surgical masks and made them as effective as the expensive and really tough to find N95 masks. And 1,800 people actually came together to support this and bring it to life. Artists Hank Willis Thomas and Eric Gottsman for the For Freedoms organization launched the 50 State Initiative in 2018. They put up 52 artist-designed billboards bearing thought-provoking messages across all 50 states, plus Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. They funded all 52 billboards on the platform. And Hair Love, this is a personal favorite, became a passion project by Matthew Cherry, an African-American father who was trying to do his daughter's hair for the first time and wanted to share that journey and that experience. It went on to win an Oscar for Best Animated Short, and that's shaping the way that we look at the way we interact with the world around us. So we exist to empower these artists, these musicians, filmmakers, designers, all types of creators, and we want them to find the resources that they need to bring their ideas to reality. Every Kickstarter creator gets to retain creative control of their work. That's a really important thing because often as we're seeking folks to help us out funding for our projects, you often have to give away a little piece of your creative independence. Someone helps you, brings you some resources, and they're going to help to shape your idea now too. Here, you get to actually take the idea that you have and see it through. And you get to build a vibrant community and audience around that to support you. So big or small, your projects can come to life in your vision, and it allows you to take a risk on these ideas that you have. And we see this mission to bring creative projects to life as actually a public good. The more that we see projects like this going to shape the world, the better society benefits on a whole. And when we think about our business and how we construct our company, we also want to think about what it means to be a good citizen in the world of business. So we designed a charter as we became a PBC to actually do that for us. First and foremost, it was to help us lock our mission into the primary focus of what we'll do to stand the test of time. And we made additional commitments too that really surround what it means to be a good citizen in the world of business. Finding ways to champion art and creative work, reflecting our values around limiting our environmental impact, and finding more ways to support an equitable and creative world. And we do that in particular where we take 5% of our after-tax profits and donate it to fight systemic inequality and to pursue arts. And we measure the success that we have actually not by the profits that we make or the size of that, but by how well we achieve our mission. I'm always incredibly humbled when I get a chance to stand on a stage like this with incredible panelists to just share in the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that so many artists and creators and supporters of creative work have pushed. And also the long list of folks who supported us for so long, our current team, to our founders, and to everybody who's touched the platform over the last 11 years. This work, this creative work, is what goes on to transform and evolve the world around us. And we as Kickstarter aim to be here for decades to make sure that those projects have a place to come to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. That was great. Our second presenter is Studio 189 for Emerging Designer Award. And we have Abrima Erwiah with us today. Studio 189 is a lifestyle brand and social enterprise launched in 2013 that works with communities in Ghana that specialize in traditional craftsmanship techniques and focuses on empowerment, creating jobs, and supporting education and skills training. Abrima and her partner, Rosario Dawson, operate an e-commerce site, a manufacturing facility in Accra, Ghana, and they also support several community-led projects in Africa and the US. Welcome, Abrima.
Hi, thank you. That last presentation was amazing. I was like this. Thanks for having me and for being in such great company and it's an amazing audience. So my name is Abrima Erwiah. I am going to tell a little bit about my story and a little bit about the project that I do. So I'm half American and half West African. My mom is from Mississippi and my father is from Ghana and Ivory Coast. And I'm a born and raised New Yorker. And I had been working for several luxury companies. When I was in college, I studied in Italy and I fell in love with Italian culture. And I was really interested in understanding how things were made because you learn so much about how wine is made and how clothing is made. And it's always very fascinating. And I started working for Italian luxury companies and I loved the commitment to craft and artisanship and techniques passed down from generation and innovation and all of these wonderful qualities. But then when I would go visit my family in Ghana and other developing economies, I would see so many people doing incredible handwork, but having difficulty accessing the value chain, and just getting access to market. And so I was trying to figure out what I could do. And I started doing a lot of charity work, et cetera. And at the time, I was trying to figure out how to balance both doing something that was fashion related and that was design focused, but at the same time, that had impact at its heart, you know, and like fashion and kind of charitable fashion were like just two separate things. And then I discovered Muhammad Yunus and the work he was doing with microloans and social enterprise and supporting women. And I wrote a manifesto and I sent it to many people, including Rosario Dawson, who's my friend since we were younger. And she sits on the board of multiple organizations and has a big background in philanthropy and activism. And she invited me to the Democratic Republic of the Congo for the opening of the City of Joy. So that's a leadership center for women who had been the victim of rape and sexual violence, where rape is often used as a weapon of war. And it's in partnership with the local hospital called the Panzi Hospital, that recently also won a Nobel Peace Prize. So the universe takes you to wild places that you can't imagine. But when we got there, we met women who had been the victim of a lot of trauma, but they were positive and amazing and resilient and tenacious and wonderful. And they would make crafts and they would take proceeds and they would invest in agriculture, feed their kids, send their kids to school. And it became very powerful. And we understood what happens when you empower a woman and you give her $1 and how far she can take it. And we went from having just kind of a great idea or thinking we knew what we wanted to do to realizing that in order for it to work, we needed to go bottom up and work with communities that already exist, especially marginalized communities, and kind of work together and collaborate. Thus, this kind of symbol that's on this first page to build something together. So this is actually a traditional West African Adinkra symbol. And it basically means help me and let me help you. And it's a symbol of intercooperation and interdependence. And it's about collaborating and working together. And I kind of love this symbol. And it's the basis of how we work with our communities. Eventually, I went back to my job in Italy. I was at Bottega Veneta. And in 2013, Eve Ensler said 1 in 3 women will be raped and sexually violated in her lifetime. And she asked for 1 billion people to take a stance against sexual violence. And she asked them to rise, which I thought was such a beautiful movement. And she asked them to dance in solidarity. And we said that fashion could rise and fashion could be an agent of social change. And so many people had been through a lot of trauma or a lot of situations, but could rise through their craft and their creativity. And let's focus on that, because if consumers purchase that, then you eventually impact a value chain and you set off a chain of events that support so many communities. And that's so much more powerful sometimes than focusing on the negative and the negative narratives. But what if we also focused on the positive narratives and we re-empowered the value chain? So that's what this is. As the intro said, we focus on empowerment, education, and job creation. We like to say we go from farm to consumer. So and back around through a circular economy. So the cotton is actually grown, for example, in Burkina Faso. So this is a community in Burkina Faso, in West Africa. And then it's spun and then it's dyed locally. And then it's put on a bus. And then we take it to our factory in Accra, Ghana, where it's cut and sewn. And there's just a lot of processes that go behind it. But the entire value chain is supported in the local economy. And then it is a way of also modernizing it, like the silhouette that you see on the right side, which actually has a lot of craftsmanship behind it. These are just another few examples. The one on the top left is hand painted. So it's really about getting everybody involved and giving everybody a sense of purpose and value. So even the driver here is not a random person. He's our messenger, our bike messenger. Everybody's important and everybody's valued, and, she's our model, our fit model. The skirt has been hand painted. The skirt on the right is from one of our presentations. Each strip of fabric is coming from different communities with different specialties. And then it's actually very complex, but it's like 16 yards of fabric and then they're stripped together individually. So there's many communities and the whole back is recycled cotton. And then each one has a pattern and each one is placed basically like a work of art and then replaced and replaced. So it just has all these beautiful steps, but we do it all together. And that's how we end up with these pieces. But what's so beautiful about it is that when I think the person wears it, it's like living art, like they're wearing it with purpose and it's something that you're going to want to keep forever or pass down, or hopefully it goes back into the environment. These are just a few more of our pieces, and we have a lot of initiatives. I'm not going to discuss everything because I know we don't have time, but we try to work in a circular manner. So, you know, for example, using indigo dyes, which are the plants, so natural indigo dye. We do a lot of patchwork, and keeping the whole supply chain local. This is our factory in Accra. This is an example of indigo. The far right is an indigo pit. The top left is a farm where we're growing indigo in the central region of Ghana. That's what a loom looks like on the right, where indigo is being created, but there's also lots of different processes. This is an example of batik, which is resist dye. So we paint or draw shapes, and then we transfer those into wood. We carve them into wood or sponge, and then the batiker mixes dyes, and then those dyes are then you use hot wax to transfer the dye, and it's just kind of a tedious process. But each piece is made by hand. This is a traditional craft called kente, which is a royal craft of Ghana. Recycled glass beads, using Coca-Cola bottles and all the things that people throw away, using techniques coming from Murano. Everything is done by hand. So it's just like all these beautiful techniques. This is the last thing I'll show. It's a fishing village in the eastern region of Ghana. We had a partnership with NYU. It's a course called Stern International Volunteer Program. And essentially the students learn about Ghana. But what's so beautiful is that the woman on the left, Aggie, who was one of our first artisans, we took her and she trained this very poor fishing village to how to make fabrics. And it's not so much about the fact that they're poor. I only say that to make a point that really is irrelevant. It's more about the fact that people can help each other, and by doing it together, they can get out of their own circumstances. And I think it's also important for people, when I know we're going to talk about all this stuff, so I'll close. But you know, there's an incredible relationship between the work we're doing and then the environment we're in. So nothing lives as a silo independently, which I guess we're seeing in this pandemic. So when we use dyes or food or et cetera, all that stuff enters the same water supply, and it impacts the communities that are working within those. As you see, it's the same fishing village. They wash their clothes in the same water. They fish in the same water. If they're using toxic dyes, it's going to go inside the same water, and people will eat it and live with it. So it's always just interesting to, I'll stop sharing, but to think about stuff like that. And that's kind of what we're doing in the work we're doing. So anyway, thank you. Excited for this conversation.
Wow. Thank you so much, Abrima. You're just empowering so many people. Just so amazing. Our third panelist is Catapult Design, and the award is Product Design. And we have Angela Hariche with us. Catapult Design was founded in 2008 by product designers and engineers who met through volunteer work with Engineers Without Borders. To effect meaningful change, they formed a nonprofit to build capacity for their clients to help serve their customers and improve the quality of life for literally thousands of people living in poverty. They have helped over 50 clients in 14 countries with over 70 design solutions that improve the quality of life for communities that have the most critical needs. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am just delighted to be here, and I'm so excited to be here with these panelists, and really happy to share a bit about Catapult. So Catapult is a product and service design nonprofit, which started in 2008. I am not the founder. So when we get into how do you build your company to last, I have a lot to say about that. I'm the second CEO to come in, so I'm bringing in the new generation of this. So great timing, thanks. So Heather Fleming was the CEO who started Catapult, amazing woman. She started with a group of like-minded individuals who came out of Engineers Without Borders. We've all worked in Asia and Africa and North America on projects spanning from global health to financial mobility. I mean, everywhere you name it. The company's changed a lot over the years. You know, it started really small, then it got bigger, and then it became a network. And so really the average number of years that people stay with the company is around 7. I joined the company a year and a half ago as the CEO with a background in international development and social impact startups. And now it's my job to grow the company and scale our efforts. So I'm really excited for the next phase of Catapult for sure. I think that, with my background in international development, I worked at the UN for many years. I worked at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. My design life probably didn't start until about, I would say, maybe 10 years ago, when I was living in West Africa, and I just recognized that there was something wrong. There was something, just we weren't working with the communities to foster change, and the solutions are with the communities. And I just sort of felt like I wanted to start that journey and start to understand this design thing that everybody was talking about, because social impact design is really young. I mean, it's really in its adolescence at this point. So there's a lot to do and a lot to learn. And I think any of the young people that are on this, you have a really great opportunity to create what the next phase of social impact design is going to be. We have, as Angie said, we have a whole lot of projects, but I thought today it would be interesting to recognize that it is International Hand Washing Day. And the 2020 theme is hand washing for all. And just to give you a little, obviously everybody who's on this call is in a pandemic, and hand washing is a key element to stop the spread. But, even outside of pandemic, there are 818 million children who don't have access to basic hand washing with water and soap at school. And at least 3 billion people, or 40% of the world's population, don't have a hand washing facility with soap and water at home. And that is according to the World Health Organization and UNICEF. So I went through the archives and, found that we had actually done a hand washing station. And we did it in 2014, actually. And we did it with Innovations for Poverty Action. And I just thought this was a good example of, the kind of work that we do. So the objective was to design marketable and scalable off-grid hand washing equipment. And it was, there was already a version of this, and there's other versions of this that have gone on since. That's the great thing about design. You don't necessarily design something and it's done. Like, you keep going. Innovations for Poverty Action has iterated on this thing since we've been in there. But what Catapult does is, and I think where our sweet spot is around this really understanding and working with communities so that they can design what works for them, right? And then there's a an equation that goes on around how much can they afford, right? But then everybody, who has worked at international development knows that if they find it worthwhile, they will pay for it. There is no question about it. So the whole charity equation also needs to be flipped on its head. And I think that, what Catapult did was, they really tried to figure out what was the context of this. And so this was in West Africa and, this was in East Africa, in Kenya, rural Kenya. And Catapult held town meetings, and they surveyed households, and they visited clinics. And for months, this went on for months and months, and worked with local partners, in different settings and households and schools and clinics to try to figure out what really mattered, in this kind of technology. And they found out that what really mattered was soap security, affordability, and adaptability. So kind of what came out of it was this pavu poa, which is cool foam in Swahili. So it was a way to be water frugal around, and that was very important, in West Kenya. So it was really a way to be water frugal and to get this foam on their hands in a way that was useful for them and convenient for them. So I thought I would just throw this one out there as something that was very relevant for what we're talking about today, and also what's going on in the world. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you, Angela. That was really amazing. To just kind of tell you guys how the rest of the show is going to run, if you just joined us, we're going to have a moderated discussion for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to have Q&A for about 20 minutes. And I'm going to pose a few questions to the three panelists, and feel free to tag on and expound on each other's views. Panelists, I think there's a lot of overlaps between each of the things that you guys do, but then there's also some specific differences. So my first question to the panelists is, this is a national design award and all of you work globally. So can each of you speak to the importance of social impact, because I personally feel like it's very important, through your global work? Studio 189 manufactures products in Ghana and works to improve education and communities there. So I'd like to start with Abrima.
So sorry, the question is about our social impact work in.
Yeah, so why did you make the decision to, you're working globally as opposed to nationally?
Well, I think a big, on top of what I said in the opening is, I think that we're just from so many places, and it's such a reality. Like, even as an American, like, what does that, I mean, what does it mean, right? Like, I think it's important to recognize that and to go back a few hundred years and realize that we're from so many places. And I'm always really fascinated to understand how everything interconnects. Like, the more you ask questions, the more curious you are, the more travel, and the more you actually, dig into information, both in terms of actually how we connect, but also through like culture, through art, through music, through food, through dance. Like, you start to realize that so much of it has been, transferred and transformed and evolved. And as Angela said earlier, things evolve, design evolves. And I think it's so real. And, me, like, my mom is from Mississippi, like, we're hundreds of years of slaves on that side, like, and then when I see the connection of like how that worked and how you got from Africa, I find that really interesting. And so I felt, there was a time in my life when I felt somewhat disconnected, I didn't feel like I could speak on behalf of other, because who am I, but then you start to realize, actually, I do have a voice, and I'm a participant in how this is going. And if I don't say something, or if I don't participate, then what am I doing? And I had gotten to that point in my career where it's interesting to see how the world has changed, but where I was sitting in rooms where there wasn't a lot of women, the higher I was going, and there wasn't a lot of diversity, the higher I was going. And I think that we always feel like some magic, huge, important figure changed history. But then I was like, actually, there's probably so many invisible people throughout history that did something, and then so it turns the mirror on you and you think, well, what am I doing? And for me, a bigger part of what I'm doing is when I, like I said, when I go home or I travel, I look exactly like, these are my cousins. Like, this is my family, like, these are, or young women who look exactly like me. The difference is maybe a passport, or maybe, access to something somebody else didn't have. And so how could I rebridge the gap and kind of reduce this kind of us and them, at least in the work that I was doing? And that's how I felt personally accountable and responsible. And I just wanted to make beautiful things so people could stop focusing on that and kind of show how we're more similar than we are different. And I think you can do that through design and impact.
Yeah, that is great. I mean, if you think about it, we're actually a very young country and we're made up of immigrants. So, we should be doing that. And we've talked a lot about women and empowering women. So I wanted to go to the next woman panelist, Catapult Design, Angela. Catapult Design creates products in 14 different countries. So maybe you can speak to the impact of social impact design. You're different than the way Abrima does it, but it still has the same impact. And the next question is going to be talking more about the business. So I do want to talk to you about that.
Okay, no, don't worry. I'll hold on the business. You're just kind of riffing off what Abrima was saying. I grew up in the South, the U.S. South, and to an Italian family. So I mean, I grew up like already like in this culture of like screaming opera through the rooms and big lasagna dinners, and it was very different from what was going on outside my house, which was in Savannah, Georgia. And so I already had that, and then I thought, okay, well, that's great. So what else is out there, And I think that was where I got my global. So then when I started my career, it was global, always global, to the point where like when I was in my mid-20s, if I didn't get global, I just couldn't even talk about the world. Like, don't even talk to me about it. I was so upset that I wasn't out there, And so then I got out there and I started working, international organizations that took me everywhere all around the world. And then when I decided to leave the whole international development world, I, in the big organizations, I was really looking for the smaller startups. And so I did that and worked in small startups, and that was, also very global. And then Catapult. So I kind of came at it another way. It was like my career was already global, and I wanted to absolutely stay global because everything that Catapult has done over, in developing countries or other countries is absolutely applicable in the United States. And we've done a lot of work in the US too. And I know this is a global discussion, but that is a very important point. A lot of the work that that Catapult did on the Navajo Nation, for example, was directly influenced by the work that they did in Africa. So I think that's an important point. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, I think it's about kind of framing your life through the lens of this global world that we live in. And I think all of us really, if all of us do that, it'd be a better world. So I want to get to Aziz. Kickstarter allows 25 different countries to be creators on the tool Kickstarter, and anyone from any country can back a project. So Aziz, I'd like you to just talk about that impact and why you made that decision.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll come at it from a couple directions. I think like Angela, I'm actually not one of the founders of the company. I actually took over the role of CEO about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And I think the thing for me though, that personally was like such a strong connection was obviously the mission in and of itself. But when I think about design, so my background is also design. So I was a designer at Kickstarter, and I moved my way up. And the thing here is like when you design for basic human desires, right? And like that to me is where like the essence of a lot of social change and impact comes from, right? Like what do we as humans, the connection that we have to each other. And so when I just think about fundamentally, when you think about creative work and support, like it is, in my opinion, it's basic human desire to support somebody with a good idea that you believe in and you want to see them succeed. So that in my eyes transcends, geography, transcends any barrier that you could think of. And so simply by just opening up a way for people to connect their ideas to people who care about it, that I think, can create this ripple effect of change. And ultimately, these are the ideas that go and change the world around us, right? They shape the culture, they shape the society that we live in. And I think something as I was listening to Angela speak and to Abrima speak, like we all have this really like local ecosystem concept and like where we're doing some work, but how connected it is to a global society, right? We look at little parts of the world and we say, hey, there's an idea here, or there's some people here, a small community, and you activate that. And you activate it and you try to give it a stage that is much bigger than yourself and much bigger than that community. And, that to me, I think really makes, that's the stuff, that's just like human like desire is to like, we want to connect in that way. And the thing that I think is always challenging when you're trying to do that is like, the business will tell you not to do it that way. The business will tell you to do it a totally different way, right? Oh, go and like, take over this piece or like drive up this metric or whatever. If you go back to like, there's a concept around creating wealth or value that's not monetary, right? This is like human currency, emotion, voice, connection, like all these things. And so when you point yourself in trying to create that type of value, I think so much of the social impact or like these, they start to ripple out from each other. They start to create some momentum. They create a cycle there that then allows you to, I think bigger than just the local area you might be in, the small community that you're a part of, and it connects globally.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Sorry. What I like to like such good stuff. I feel that what we're all doing and what, I think that even these words, what do they mean? Like these things were always happening. People were always doing this work, but they were doing it without credit, right? Like, people like once we globalize.
Pro bono, not a business.
Or even they were being paid, but like you just don't know who they are and you don't know what kind of condition you're working in. And they're essentially invisible, and all the credit was always going to this kind of like one part of society. And as we're seeing, more and more, the wealthiest part of society is getting smaller and smaller, people are kind of getting more and more invisible. And so the idea here, which I think everyone is doing, and that's I feel actually quite inspired by this conversation, and that's what I was motivated by, is by kind of opening the curtain and like lifting up, like they were already doing it. We just didn't know people didn't know who they were. Kickstarter does it so great, but like I like to say like making the invisible visible. We're just lifting them back up. So it's like, is it impact? I know that's the word we all use, but is it, or were they always there and they were just kind of shoved to the side and just, like how do we give them a voice again? And how do we give ourselves a voice again? Because we're them too, you know? And I think that's what's so powerful. It's like, I think we're all, Cooper Hewitt, all of us have like made this kind of common choice to make the invisible visible and to give people a voice. I love that.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. I think, you know, this basic human desires, allowing people to connect, and it makes me think about the physical barriers that we're building, like the wall, and how maybe we should look, you know, we're actually looking to digital tools as bridges, and we really need to start thinking about making bridges as opposed to walls around the world. So I'm going to go into my second question, because I think formalizing it, as you guys said, is really important. And Angela, you said that social impact design is really kind of early and in the early stages. And I think what you guys are doing is really like planting a seed. You know, it's something that we should do, and all businesses should really be doing what you're doing. Kickstarter is a public benefit corporation, which is a legal incorporation to identify a purpose beyond maximizing shareholder value. Studio 189 is a social enterprise, is ideological, combines a social mission with a market-driven approach of a business, and Catapult Design is a nonprofit. So there's 3 different business models. As leaders in your field, others, maybe even on this call, may want to know more about your business model, how you found your company, and how do you make it work. And some of you have talked a little bit about that already, but maybe given that I know Aziz now, he's only been CEO for a few years, and Angela is the second CEO of Catapult Design, maybe I'll start with Angela.
Sure, thank you. I love this topic. So yes, Catapult is a nonprofit. It started in 2008. And because they came out of this, you know, they were all volunteers before they became, paid. And so I think there was a point where they're like, wait a minute, can we get paid for kind of what we do? Wouldn't that be great? And so I think that's what they kind of set out to do. You know, so there was never a, we want to take equity in other companies, or we want to, there wasn't a real capitalistic push behind the company. It was really, really earnestly like, let us do great work for a great reason. And so now we've come along a bit. And I know that Heather, even in her later years in the company, started to look at different models, and because there's a couple of things here going on. We're a design firm, right? And even the design, whether you're commercial or whether you're nonprofit, that whole model needs to be rethought. People are rethinking it. Frog Design is doing some really interesting work with a fund so that they are able to actually invest in some of the companies that they support. See, because what we find as a nonprofit working in social, in social impact is that sometimes we're called in to do one piece of something, and then we don't know what happens to it. Like, we know it's being iterated on, but and sometimes nothing happens. And it's like, well, could we have done something to get them over the line? So I think that's kind of where we are now, looking at those kind of new models. We'll always keep our nonprofit, absolutely. But the question is whether we'll go into a hybrid, kind of a hybrid situation, but there's trade-offs, right? So I've worked in, venture capital backed impact startups, which, you have to go really fast. There is a return on investment. You have big investors that are like, well, how come I haven't made a bunch of money off of 1 million women, like you said, and it's like, well, wait a minute. No, it can't. It takes a long time, these things. So you've got to make sure that, you got your right partners and all of that in there. And so I think, yeah, so those are my main comments on that. Always be really flexible. New models come out all the time. See if there's any way that you could try things out. That's exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
And I think part of it is just surrounding yourself with like-minded people. I know in my past, I've co-founded a couple different nonprofits, and it really started when a group of us were just sitting around a table and saying, wow, this really needs to change and nobody's doing it. Maybe we should just do something about it. So maybe Aziz, you can jump into that. I know you were certified as you had a public company certification first, and then you became a public benefit corporation, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think just as the way you frame the question, as people are thinking about how to found their company, how to start it, what are the tools, what should I use? I think that there's something at the center of it, which is that, like, ultimately, what do you believe is the purpose that you're going to hold true above everything else? And then look at literally everything else as a tool in that journey. And the reason that I say that is that, at the point where Kickstarter was founded, the intention around the mission was always there. This idea that art and creative expression are so important to a healthy and vibrant society, right? And so that has been like the true thing that we've always held as our core belief and value. And we believe that that is a form of social good. And so along the way, whether it was a mission statement, or later it was a set of values, or after that it was our corporate structure, these were all tools to make sure that that remained, at the core and center of what it is. The reason that I say that is just like, and I would say, especially for the designers out there, like, this is the thing that we do, right? You look at the problem and you think about like 100 different things, and you just want to find the right solution. You want to really just know that you found the right thing. And the right thing changes. A PBC, a public benefit corporation, didn't exist when the company was founded. But over time, this just became a tool for us to say, we're going to lock this mission into place for years to come, right? It's going to be actually future-proof in some way that, a new CEO comes in, and, I'm not going to be in a position to change that. And I think that's a really important aspect of, like, hold the higher purpose and make that, use all the tools that you can to keep that into place. And I think when you can bring that into your corporate structure, and this is, I think, another thing that I've learned as a designer over time, is that the key components of the system that you're putting together, your business, your idea, your supply chain, those pieces actually have a natural conclusion. So when you think about a corporation, and if the remit for a corporation is maximize shareholder value, the natural end point of that is to maximize the value, which is profit. And so the public benefit corporation for us allowed to say that the thing that we're going to maximize our value for, the thing that we're going to do the most for, is against the social impact that we want to have. And we're going to it put us in a position to design a charter that allowed us to put in commitments around what we felt, a responsible business was going to look like, how we think about, environmental impact, data privacy, all these things, but the core mission still remains around, bringing creative projects to life. And so all of these, to me, they're tools along the way in this longer journey. And Abrima said this, which I think is always tough, right? It's like, you're trying to figure out what your voice is through this whole thing, to realize that you have one, that you can do something with it, and that other people want to join you in doing it. And so, finding that and then locking that into place and bringing people along on the ride, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, that is great. You said earlier that measuring success was exactly that, meeting your mission, and I think a lot of people, even when young people go out and look for a job, you don't necessarily go to a job interview and ask the person interviewing you, what is your mission? But I'm actually seeing a lot of young people doing that now, even in our business, because we do a lot of social impact work, and people will come to us and say, we're coming to you because we like what you do. But in the past, I would have never done that, and it's something that I think more people should do. So Abrima, I want to ask you if you have a mission statement.
Yeah, we say to use fashion as an agent of social change.
Okay.
That's our mission statement, yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about your social enterprise, and maybe just talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I echo what everybody's saying. It's fascinating how everything just keeps changing. Like, there's so many, I'm learning even somebody said I think it was Angela, that it's very nascent. It's, I don't remember who said it, but it is like, what it was 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It keeps changing and evolving. And so, for me, there's a few things. Like, obviously we know what a social enterprise is, so I won't get too much into that, but there are a few things. Like, one is, a big mission for us was to break the narrative. I thought it was really important that this kind of constant narrative of, Africa charity needed to break. You're looking at fastest growing countries in terms of GDP, we're all mostly developing economies. In terms of capability, production wise, raw material resources, in order to reframe the conversation around kind of growth and opportunity in developing economies, we have to change the way we're looking at it. Like, this idea of looking at it through sad, impoverished eyes it just didn't feel right. And that was a huge part of it. And that was difficult, you know, because what it creates multiple things. Like it creates the dead aid scenario. It creates the scenario where so many people who are so capable and so talented don't feel valued and don't operate in dignity. And that doesn't make any sense, or selling things at super cheap prices, you know? And so like, it was about, a lot of it was about re-elevating that perspective. So it's like, no, you're doing business, you're a craftsman, or you do something. How much is it worth? You know, like, what do you think this is worth? How much time did you spend on it? You know, like, how do you calculate the cost of goods, et cetera? Like changing how you're speaking about something. Because if I was in New York, which I am right now, and somebody's selling me something, I wouldn't say, oh, you're poor, let me just give you $1. And I like, you spend $50, but I don't really care. I'm going to give you $1 just like, they wouldn't even tolerate it. They'd be like, get out of here. You know, but there people they do it because they're debating about feeding their kids. They got no choice, you know? And so it was like, a lot of it had to be about reframing, which was difficult because they wanted to make it about, you know, Rosario's charity in Africa. That was kind of the press loves to say stuff like that. Oh, you're so great. And you're kissing the babies and people want to do that. Oh, pick up the baby, kiss it, pick a picture. No, it's not about that, you know? And so building business was really important, and kind of going from this kind of like this to this kind of handshake is the scenario. And so like, that was one. So like looking at it from a business perspective, but rethinking about how business was done. That was critical. So we are a business, but also thinking about it in terms of impact. So that's the business structure, but also we have a charitable aspect as well, because that's also critical. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about the perspective, we say it's nascent here, it's even more nascent there. You know, like when I was saying in the beginning, when I formed the charity in Ghana, you know, people, when you say you have a charity, it means that you give somebody money or something and you walk away. So that idea of sustainability, oh, how's it going? That's not your job, because then people think you're going to do something corrupt. If you say it's a charity, and I'm sure Angela knows a lot about this, like your development goal, you say this is what you're doing, you give the person the thing, and that's where you stop. It's not for you to stay on them at that level, because at some point it's like, oh, well, why are you here? What are you trying to do here?
Right.
Yeah, but it's an interesting, it's a cultural shift in mindset, because traditionally that's what charity always was. It was like, we have to give you 10% and we give you the money and we walk away. And, you know, now it's changed. And now it's like, no, actually, we want to do this with you. We want to grow together. How can we help you build a business for the long term? You know, whatever that thing is, or build out your project. So I love this idea of hybrid models. I love that these hybrid models are developing. We're set up as both. I think over time, we're going to change again for sure, you know, but I think it's so important to kind of go business first in terms of the way you operate. So you're actually trying to maximize shareholder value, but then changing your, like Aziz said, changing your principles and changing your targets and what matters more to you. Do you need to be $1 trillion company, or like, is it enough to sustain yourself and to make sure like resources are spread out evenly across the supply chain? So.
Yeah, and I would say that it's a lot harder to empower people and communities, what you're doing, than it is to just give money away. You know, I think it's sometimes really easy for people to do that. And it's the hard work that you guys are doing that really is the challenge that I wish more people were doing, you know, empowering communities.
And also I just want to add, it's important, we like it when they own it themselves, you know, like that project we did with NYU, we showed them how to do it, but they have their own bank account. They own that company. It's set up locally. NYU taught them how to manage their books and does follow-up, but it's their money. You know, we make small investments, but it's their company. And I think that's so much more powerful because they know what people need. They know about the lights, the infrastructure. You can't manage all that.
Yeah, it's like raising a teenager. I mean, it's like someone becoming an adult, you know? Yeah. And this kind of segues into my third question for you guys. And maybe whoever wants to answer it can step in, but you've kind of talked about this, but all of you work for or provide opportunity for those who are on limited incomes, or what we would call limited incomes as Americans. And you've all talked to me about the importance of taking the long view. For instance, Kickstarter is an example of living system design, ensuring the health of the platform over the long term. And that's exactly opposite to the world that we live in today, which is made up of these short sound bites. So I wanted you guys to think about what you would say to the young adult of today or the young adult maybe of the future of 2050 about taking the long view as you navigate a challenging world. And it might be just going back to what you said, Abrima, which is that business first. But maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, about what you see in the future, and maybe something for the young adults who are on the call.
Who's going first?
You go.
Okay, I'll go. All right. So I think there are a couple of things here. One is that it's about the right partners. So it's, you know, Angie, like you said before, finding those like-minded individuals. You're going to, and absolutely for the young ones on the call, you're going to run into the wrong people. It's going to happen. It's okay. Just you'll recognize them very quickly as you move on in your life, and then you will find those right people and you'll know who they are. The other thing is right data. I think that, you know, when you're looking at the long haul and you're looking at, and everything is just like so short and soundbitey and tweets and all this, it's like, you know, really quality data is going to tell you about the problem that you were trying to solve. So find those quality data sources and ensure that you are absolutely analyzing those data sources, you know, but this will just ensure that you don't get into a reactive space. So you're really absolutely trying to meet your mission while ensuring that you are, you know, following that right data and following the information that's quality. It isn't about you. So when you start an organization, don't make it about you, because you might decide in 5 years you want to go and do something else. Then what? You still have a brilliant idea, but you may not want to do it anymore. So I think I think it was Aziz who was saying, you know, we've just got to, it's about the mission. It's not about you. And I think that's going to get you far. And Catapult was successful in that. And then slow down and really slow down and pay attention to the micro pivots that you need to make. I mean, there are these big ones like, okay, are we going to become a hybrid organization, or are we going to, but sometimes it's just about one staff member that you're kind of like, might need to put her into another position. Maybe she's ready to grow. Those tiny little things that, you know, you just sort of notice and you might need to take action on, and all of those together can really make for a successful company. So, thank you.
I'm happy to jump in. You know, something that comes to mind is just, you know, like, and I think you're seeing it in everything that maybe we're sharing, at least as you're understanding the businesses that we're in, is that it's all part of a much bigger ecosystem. Yes, we have one piece maybe of the pie, but the minute you step back from it, you realize it's connected to 3 other pieces, and that any decision that you make actually has a rippling effect. And so, you know, the thing that I would say here is like, take that time. You're always going to have the thing that drives you, right? So for us, it's like, we want to make sure that these creative projects make it out into the world, right? But if you think about everything that goes into that, there's people with ideas, people who want to support ideas, there's how they talk about their idea, it's how they form their idea, who helps them make the idea, you know, then there's the kind of emotional side of being a creator. There's all this stuff that's connected, and then the impact of that work in the world. And so the reason that I say this is start with the thing that drives you, start with the thing that you care to change, and then map the ecosystem, map all the pieces that it touches, because you want to have that picture. You may still work in the space that you feel incredibly passionate about and that you want to move forward, but you'll understand every decision that you make in the larger web of things and the society that it lives in. So that's one thing that I would say. And then the second one is like, the way that the industry and the world tells us we're supposed to operate works on a set of best practices that may not, and likely doesn't, work for whatever it is you want to do. So look at them, learn from them, but you don't need to do them. And this is really hard. Just in day to day, this is really hard because you look at the best practice, it's what 10 other people will tell you. And you just have to ask yourself the question, is it solving the problem that I intend to solve? And what can I learn from it? And how might I change it so it serves whatever it is whatever I want to do? And it's just so easy to walk into anything and say like, well, people have done it 10 times this way, we should do it this way too. And sometimes that might be the right thing to do, but you taking the moment to step back and just ask the question, to stop and reframe for a moment, I think goes a really long way. And ultimately, you'll know if it ties back to the end goal, the change, the impact that you want to have, and what part of your toolkit is that going to be.
Building off of this great advice, why do we take the long view? I think that, so many things. I think that, a lot of the information or a lot of doctrines or a lot of things that we followed were created a really long time ago. I mean, I don't think it, I know it, but that were created a really long time ago, and they got us through hundreds of years or 100 years, and we've done well. So in some respects, we're here. But the world is changing and it's shifting, and we can see it, and the data is showing it, but we can also literally see it, and I think it's really important to really ask yourself, like, what is the world going to look like in 100 years? What are you seeing? And whichever direction you want to ask that question in, but as you're designing, I think it's important to really think about that. And that's, because resources are limited, because we're seeing it, like it's the actual reality. And, how do you design for a world where resources are limited? And what kind of world do you want to live in? And as we know, 100 years can go pretty quickly. Like it's just, you can talk about your grandparents, that's just 100 years, like it's not very far, right? Like, and so it's a matter of kind of reconsidering that. And, there's a book that I really like. It's also from Muhammad Yunus, who I spoke about earlier. It's called A World of Three Zeros. And in it, he's saying that basically, the traditional, economic model, et cetera, was based on this idea that, you went to school and you studied and you did this and you went to work for a big company, you got a great job. And like, that's what you were being kind of conditioned and trained to do throughout your like process, which is actually kind of funny because only some people were trained to do that. And a lot of people are just now catching up to that, who never had the chance to do that. But now the world has shifted again, and so like what he's saying is that the reality is that a few people, like 6 people or whatever number of people, have, more than half of the people in the world in terms of money, and so what job are you going into? So what you're finding is that a lot of people actually are, which we now see with the pandemic, it's putting a catalyst on this, but they're sitting at home doing nothing, like they're literally doing nothing. A lot of people are doing nothing. And in the interim, they could actually be solving real problems. They could be creating businesses. They could be doing something in their communities that actually address something that's important and that's needed. And it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be just something great, because they have the mind for it. And so imagine what would happen if people did that, right? And so that's kind of this conversation. And I found it really fascinating because I think we forget that we were 1 billion and then we were 6 billion and they were 7 billion and we're going to be 10 billion, so resources are limited. So when I think about the world of fashion and what does that mean? It means that if you're making something using polyester or some kind of fiber that's made out of, oil and gas, where fashion is the number 2 polluter in the world and contributing 10% of CO2, it's going to take a really long time for that to decompose. Or will it ever decompose? Is it just going to sit at the top of the ocean? And so when you're designing it and when you're thinking about it, I think it's really critical to think about what the world will look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Will you have access to drinking water? And this is not in a negative way. There's nothing negative about it. It is what it is. But, knowing it now and having this option of making this choice is so much more powerful then, I actually think it's wonderful. Like Angela said about redesigning systems, you can redesign the whole system. Like you can redesign design, you can redesign fashion, you can rethink right now, especially if you're younger, or anybody can really, but you can innovate and think about like how it could be. And that's why I opened by saying a while ago, you could not have done that because it was so fixed and it had to be like this. Yep. And like Aziz said, there were these best practices and you had to know them. And if you didn't do it like this, nobody was going to give you a shot. Now you can learn that. And you can break it. You can disrupt it.
Broken open.
You can redesign the system. And that's why I think it's important to design for the long term, because that's the world you're going to be in. And where do you see yourself in? Wouldn't it be so much greater to know that you did something that impacted change 20 or 30 years before? So.
Yeah. And you had said earlier that you thought you called it a tipping point, that maybe this is the time for that to happen. And I think sometimes as an architect, I always think 100 years into the future. Fashion probably not so much, but I always tell my clients, this building's going to be here for 100 years. You mean we're not putting solar panels on it? So I always think 100 years into the future, but that is great. I want to, I think we have a few more minutes. Yes, we have a few more minutes. So I wanted to talk to Angela because we're talking about working in a lot of different countries and this idea of culture and how culture is different in different places. And so I was wondering if you could speak to how you, or how the people that work with you who are designers in this country, how they embrace a different culture, or how you train people to embrace a different culture, or how you send people to a different place to learn a culture. You know, how does that actually happen?
Yeah. So I don't think you can be trained to embrace cultures. I think that's something that, and it certainly isn't something Catapult's going to train you to do. It's just what we more so do is and I do this, and even when I joined Catapult, I did this. It goes both ways. Like, you know, when we're looking for new team members in Catapult, we'll look for certain qualities. You know, curiosity, adventuresome. Are they adventuresome? Are they resourceful? Are they, you know, all these, you know, and it isn't necessarily about, I mean, you can be 23 years old, not have traveled extensively, but maybe you are a musician, or maybe you have read extensively. So it isn't like, I mean, I gained all of my kind of experience on the road. I traveled everywhere and I loved it. And that's what I wanted to do. And I got to do it. And it was fabulous. Nowadays, travel is going to be a little bit different. So that does not, but I don't think that means that designers are going to be, you know, especially up and coming ones, are going to be at a disadvantage because, like, you know, I'm a big tennis player, and Roger Federer always said, like, you know, if you want to be a great tennis player, play basketball. You know, because you need to have, you know, you really need to have other arts that you are interested in, and all those things. Like I was just sitting down with a potential new client the other day, and I am a musician, and and the client I sat down, we were talking about a totally different thing, and he happens to be a jazz guitarist, and so we started like talking about how we riff off of things. You know, we come from totally different communities, but we came together on that issue, you know, on that level of music. And so that was, I find that people who have, you know, not just design skills, but have a whole lot of other really interesting, potentially weird things that they do. I think that is a potential connective tissue in a way. And so I think that's how we kind of, or how I handle it for sure.
Yeah, and I think, at least I know in our profession in architecture, the boundaries are disappearing between disciplines. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if it's happening in the other fashion and the other industries, but for sure I see that, and I think it's just going to make a better world because you're going to be talking about everything. And sometimes I feel like I don't want to be a jack of all trades, you know, I want to be a master, but that's not the way the world's going. Aziz, I wanted to ask you about, you've already talked about measuring success in social impact design, but you guys use a lot of data, I think, and you use data as a tool to develop systems and to kind of gauge where, I guess, your next step is going to be. Could you maybe talk a little bit about how you use data?
Yeah, let me see if I can speak to it. It might be a little different than how you're perceiving it. But the way that I'll talk about it is that, so one for us is we're thinking about the type of things that are happening on our platform, and to understand some of the dynamics that are happening there, whether that's, you know, someone having a good experience or a bad experience, a creator succeeding, not succeeding. We try to look for multiple signals so we can start to just understand what that journey for somebody is on our platform, or to understand the different tensions or forces that live inside the platform in and of itself. But I would say that, like, you know, if I'm being totally honest with this whole space, I think of social impact and like how relatively new it still is, the measurement, the data, the metrics that we want, we don't even know what those are. Like, how do you measure? And this is something that I think everybody, you know, it's been going on forever, but like, how do you know the impact of a piece of creative work? How can you measure how that ripples out into the world and into the society around you? And, you know, I think as human beings, it's interesting because, like, we are attuned in a certain way. So there's the business systems that tell you that like use money as a proxy for value. And then there's like the feeling that you have in your gut. And so we know it when we see a piece of creative work, or we see someone's idea, or you speak with somebody, you feel that. But we don't know how to measure it, right? So I would say that like a lot of the thoughts and effort that we tend to have is like the data that we don't understand. And there's, we have an insights team at the company who's often thinking both about like, hey, how do we take the existing platform? How do we think about what's happening in it? But like, how do we measure these things that are much bigger than us, that don't have an answer yet? And so I would say that like the ambition of what we could do with the data that we want to have, is often the thing that gets me really excited. But with what we do have, the thoughts are always around like, how do you connect a project to somebody who cares about it? How do you look for and take the signals that we are getting from our creators in the moment that they're having of, some practical advice they might need or some anxiety they might be feeling? And can we connect tools and resources that we have to them in that moment? And so much of that is still so nascent, but we're starting to get some signal in how we might do that.
That's really great. That's really interesting. And it's really about making connections. We have a couple minutes. So Abrima, I just wanted you to, not sure if you can answer this or not, but you use fashion design as an agent of social change. You talk about that. And I'm wondering if you think that model can be placed on top of other industries.
Oh yeah. I mean, design as an agent of change, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that fashion is everywhere and it's in everything, like it's actually completely interconnected. And I think more and more it will be interconnected because of wearables, because of all kinds of crazy innovative things that people are coming up with, where they're blending, fashion and technology. Fashion is really everywhere, and it's in more places than people think. So yes, I do. And I think that the more conscious we are of its impact, I think the more we can, impact change, I guess. The more it's really about like how we think about it from its onset. And also once it's already in play, what are we doing with it? It's like, I think fundamentally what we have to kind of change from is this model of like, somebody I think asked in the comments about fast fashion, but this model of like, I saw it, I like it, I'm buying it, I'm throwing it away. Like, I saw it about it, I'm throwing it away. Or the other one, which is, I made a super expensive luxury product. I don't want you to have it because I want you to think that it's very valuable. And so I'm going to burn it, I'm going to hide it from you, and so like this kind of waste consumption model, like that's what I feel like that's a huge part of what needs to shift. And a lot of that, I think, is tied to customers asking for more and expecting more and asking the hard questions of brands. But I believe it is integrated because it's literally everywhere. If you have a hotel, you're going to have fashion, you're going to have uniforms, you're going to have design, you're going to have elements. If you have technology, an Apple Watch is connected to fashion, like it's literally in everything and everywhere. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, in terms of CO2 emissions and its effect on the environment, it's so high, because it's really integrated into like every industry, including food, right? Like cotton is going to be a scarce resource. It uses so much water, right? Like just everything. It dyes, like what dyes are using. It's literally everything is touching. I can't really even think of many things that don't connect with fashion. And it's fascinating because I think people oftentimes see it as kind of like extra frivolous thing that doesn't matter. And also I think that sometimes the people that work there think, oh, but it's just clothes, it doesn't actually matter. And maybe there was a time when maybe that was true, but that is not true anymore. Like it matters a lot. It's the first thing that people see. It's where people have control over their image and their look, especially in a world of social media and in a world that's changing so quickly. It's how they make their own brands, their individual personal brands. And so like the more that's going to change, I think the more each one of us are accountable and figuring out, what's our voice and how do we impact change. But what I actually think it's actually really beautiful because I actually think we've been conditioned to think we don't like I was saying, have a voice, but you actually really do. Like the more you realize that each decision you're making really can change the direction of these companies and also of the planet, you actually realize how valuable your role is here. And like each time you spend this dollar, who you're investing in on these cool projects on Kickstarter, or, like each time you're making these choices, you're deciding, particularly now, because a lot of future fashion is going to be these like interesting, weird hybrid models with like dyes that don't use water, and leather that's made out of apples, and leather that's made out of pineapple, and leather that's made out of food waste or recycled this or that, like
the closed loop.
Yeah, there's all this kind of stuff, but like also thinking about, but what stuff do you want to have made, right? Like in shaping that now, because otherwise you could have things that you think are incredible, or you could have crazy things that you wish were never made, like,
right.
Defining that now is pretty important and pretty critical for the design pack.
Yeah, exactly. Critical. What you guys do is so critical. So unfortunately, we're at the end of our panel discussion, and I just want to wrap up before we open it up to questions and just say congratulations to the three of you, Abrima, Angela, and Aziz. You are the example of a true professional, and it was the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg who actually defined the true professional as someone who does something outside of themselves, something that makes life a little better for people less fortunate than you. So I want to congratulate all three of you on your award. And I want to also say thank you to the Cooper Hewitt team and all of you on the call. And I want everybody to remember that design can make a difference in people's lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are going to open it up to questions. All right, so the first one is for Aziz. How can Kickstarter positively impact those who live under oppressive governments?
An easy one.
Yeah, 2 seconds. You get 2 seconds.
All yours, Aziz.
I mean, that's a big question, and I'm not going to pretend to have an answer for it that I think could match, maybe the intent of the question, just, how important I think what you're trying to underscore there is. But I will say, at least from my perspective and sort of the point of the platform altogether, is that there are many approaches, ideas, forms of creative expression that I think through the test of time have always shown where creative work can work to share a different message, paint a different picture of the future. And so, there are many projects that I think we've watched, on our platform come to life of many different perspectives to share a message and a vision for a different future. And so this is where I see Kickstarter's role in it. And I think it was Angela and Abrima both said this, which is like, we're often there as a platform to help lift up all of the ideas and the voices that are out there. And that, I think, in and of itself allows us to rise the tide on the ideas, their ability to get out there, for people to show interest and want to participate. And so that's where I see our role in it. But, I don't have a really great answer, I think, directly to answer that question, but that's where I see Kickstarter's role.
Okay, the next question is for all the panelists. How do you make sure that as designers, you don't come at projects with a savior complex? Can you speak more about trusting the people you are designing for as the experts? And I think, Abrima, you talked a little bit about that, but if you guys could speak to that.
Can I jump in on this one a little bit? I actually would like, I want to, for me, I think they won't let me save them. I think it's surrounding people. I think it's important to surround yourself with people that are authentic and have integrity and that challenge you. Like my team, listen, they keep me on my toes. They do not let me go up high in my mind. Like, it does not work like that, but that's intentional. Like, I don't have yes men or I don't have any of that. Like my artisans, they could be in the village. They will text me, you didn't do enough, or like do better, or, like they are constantly checking me, and it's not a one-way street. It is a partnership full on. And, we set it up that way. Like, it is not, it might even have been an easier road if I had gone in that, I'm just here to drop in for 2 seconds and I'm leaving. And it's absolutely not like that. It was like slow, organic, and it's all about, I think, finding collaborators that want to be about what you're about, the same way you would, work here or somewhere else. Like you hire your team, or you collect, you get your friend group. You're not going to only hang out with people that love you or that say you're amazing. You're going to have different people, and I think having a diverse group of voices and people that challenge you and that want to keep pushing for excellence, for like this common mission that's above you, like we said, is that, because they're not working, it's not about you, it's about the mission and the cause, and it goes way above you, and they make sure you remember that, and they check you. And I think I get checked a lot. So, and I love that, the technology is great for that, because you can be in the village, and what's the difference? It's a phone. They don't see the difference. I got a phone, you got a phone. I got to say what I got to say. You got to say what you got to say. And then we keep it going. I actually am not into the savior situation. So I can't imagine anybody here is. But that's my 2 cents.
I'll jump in on this. I agree with Abrima. Same. If a product isn't designed to, with the people who are going to be using it, then it's no good. Okay, it's just not going to be any good, because that's not how we define good. That's not how we measure good. So we are, when we start to work with a cohort, or we start to work with partners, and we're working with communities in country, we're looking for their expertise. That's what we're riffing off of. Like what if they have expertise and they have capabilities, and those are the things that we are designing with. So it's not like, we never would come in with any kind of savior complex in any way. We're interested, yes, in helping, but we're interested in really quality design. And in order to get that quality, you've absolutely got to work very closely. Like Abrima said, check yourself constantly. I mean, all the Catapult team is that way, and everybody we work with. So it just has to be that way.
And I guess Kickstarter is really a tool where it doesn't really allow that to happen.
Well, I think, in one respect, I mean, it's always hard, I think, for an individual designer, where you place your motivations, all those things. But I would say that, like, this has always been my approach, which is that the more curious you stay, and the more you believe that there is something much bigger than you in the solutions and problems that you are trying to solve, that I think is how you push yourself, beyond maybe what might be someone stepping into an accidental savior complex or coming in with that intention. I don't know that I have a lot of advice for how you change someone's outlook or perspective on that. I think that is very personal. I think when you're thinking about designing teams, it comes down to a lot of those guiding ethoses that you put in place. And I think particularly for designers, the baseline, at least this has always been in my opinion, but it's always hard to do, is like, one is you got to keep them curious. So don't ever believe you know everything, because you don't. And two, go experience it, period. And that, like, those are the two things that I feel like you will learn, and you will see so much more than you really understand. I think somebody in that question had said, well, wouldn't you let the folks that you're designing for be the experts? And I think that what you're trying to create here is actually partnership, seeing multiple perspectives, looking at the same problem in so many different ways, that, like, the solution isn't mine and it's not yours. Like, we're trying to create a solution to a problem. And so that as much as you can remove the ownership idea in that, I think the closer you can get to really solving those problems.
And that's the definition of a designer, right? That's what designers do. So I'm going to go to the next question, which is for all panelists. Do you guys have any advice for young designers interested in working in this space? How do you start? And I'm guessing that is not, I would say start with a mission statement.
I can try to speak a little bit to this, but I'll come at it maybe from a weird place, which is just, I think if you're interested in working in the space, it's just like kind of relentlessly try to find ways in which you can leverage the skills that you have today that move you closer to doing the work that you really care about in this space. And I'll maybe speak about my own journey here, which is like so non-traditional. How I even got into design. I was pre-med when I came out of college. I picked up Photoshop, by accident. I started to learn about design, through like some brainstorming exercises, and worked in different parts of the industry. So the reason that I just bring that up is I don't think that there's any traditional approach to get to this place anymore. I think it really comes down to, what's ultimately the change that you want to see in the world? What's the thing that drives you just as an individual? And then either going out there and making that happen yourself, and starting something, or finding places that really connect with that spirit for you, and be part of that journey, be part of that that kind of bigger continuum of people trying to drive that change.
I agree. And I also think take time to learn something. I think that there's this feeling, these quick wins, and I saw this person do it really quickly, so I don't have to, I'm going to do it that way. I think that, it doesn't hurt to take time to learn, to experience firsthand, even and to appreciate your failings, appreciate them, because you learn from those too. And that's the best way to learn. People are, I think, sometimes afraid to fail, but especially early on in your career, fail as much as you can. It's the best way, because then you can ask the questions, you can be curious, you can learn, you can experience what it feels like, you can develop empathy towards somebody else. When they make those same mistakes, you'll understand how and why they made them, which will make you a better leader eventually. But I think there's that, and something that I also learned in my more recent part of my career is a little bit of patience and forgiveness for yourself, especially in the moment we're in now, but like things take time, like you said. My career was also non-traditional. I studied finance and international business in college. Like I knew I was interested in design, but I didn't know I'd be where I am today. Like, I had no idea. Like that's where my journey was going to take me. But I think in the world we're in now, it's actually good to have these kind of pivoted journeys, because then you'll start to see things from more of a 360 holistic point of view, and you'll understand better how the dots connect, because that ecosystem is really getting stronger. And this kind of siloed view of the world is like, I think that's over. So I think having some patience, and I completely agree with Aziz's response, and learning, like don't be afraid of a little education and experience.
I agree with that, with both of you. Myself also completely non-traditional. I did have an arts degree as undergrad, and I was a filmmaker and still am. But then I kind of moved into high tech when I was in San Francisco in the 90s, because that's what everybody did. And then I ended up going over to France and ended up at an international organization because they wanted somebody with a little bit of high-tech experience and some creativity. And so I ended up in energy working on climate. And it was like, and then once you start down that road, you can't turn back. Like once you know, you can't unknow things. And so like Abrima said, definitely learn. And don't be so worried about like your trajectory. Like I'm never really worried about that. And I think that especially when you're younger, it doesn't matter. Like literally do whatever makes you happy and what is interesting to you, because even if you fail, you will recover. You can recover. It's not okay. I would not give that advice to somebody who's 68 years old, but I would, I think that for the younger crowd here, I think that's definitely true. And try all sorts of things. I think that working in all sorts of different sectors is also great. Try yourself out in the public sector. Try yourself out in the private sector. Get a job, going over to peacekeeping or those kinds of things. You'll learn that you will really learn your design skills will get honed if that's really what you want to do, because that's the question, right? How do I get into this? A design for social impact. And I think so many of those experiences will sharpen you as a designer.
That's great advice. And it's just amazing that all three of you have come from different places, totally and completely different places. And I wanted to tell Abrima that failure happens all the time for us too. So even those of us over the age of 55, failure happens all the time. And so I think the point is to not let it stop you or slow you down, because failure is a part of success. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question is, how do you ensure there is diversity in your teams? And anyone can take that.
I'll go. People always ask this question on panels, or I said on panels a lot about diversity right now. And my first response is always just do it. Like it's a lot of it is I know I'm oversimplifying it, but I always do that kind of intentionally. Sometimes I think it's a matter of shifting your perspective. Like I think a lot of traditional companies, we're looking at the world one way sometimes. And then when they wanted to add in diversity, it was like this tokenism idea, or let's just make sure we sprinkle these people in because we forgot about them or something. But, like if you're actually living in a world where you see that there are a lot of different backgrounds, whatever that background is, of opinion, of thoughts, of that's what your customer looks like. And that's what your company should look like, because your company should reflect what your customer looks like. And hopefully that's what your community looks like. I understand, again, some traditional companies and maybe some more localized markets when there wasn't diversity in their community. So if you're a small tailor in Italy or something, and it was your family and you never saw a lot of different people. And so you built this kind of, what people look like, their history. And so it's a little strange to you to all of a sudden have to accept so many different cultures. I get it, but if you've now decided to take that small company in the roadside of Italy and turn into a global company where you're talking to so many different people, you can't, that mindset is like, it's got to go, because that doesn't reflect your community. And so to me, I think like, do it, like if that's what your community is about, then that's what you should be doing. And I think if you do that, you're going to have, like we said earlier, richer ideas, richer thoughts, people who challenge you, I don't think it should be done just so you don't get in trouble. I think you should do it because that's just the way the world is going. If you don't want to do it for good reasons, then do it because selfish business reasons. Then like that is the way the world is going. That is the demographics of the world. That is the way business is going. Like fastest growing, cultures are not like one culture. It's like Africa, Asia, like these are the fastest growing. So it's like, and it's not just about where you're from. It can be about your size. It can be about, abilities. It can be about whatever, but just do it, and that I always feel like it's just like, why don't I just do it? And then if it's not being done, sometimes there's a really good reason, which is why I love designers too, because we go down the chain and figure out why. If you can't find somebody who has the skill sets you need, then you got to ask yourself why. If you're being presented with candidates and they all look the same, or they have a specific kind of background, you got to ask yourself, what is this about? And then you got to start going down the pipeline. And maybe because traditionally people were pivoted away from that career. So how do we like take that long view and think, all right, cool. So I cannot find them right now, but maybe in 5 years, I will find them. Like in my case, for example, I wanted to do certain jobs when I was graduating college, and I was literally redirected. I would sit in interviews and I speak 4 languages. I have a very good education. People would be like, no. And what did I do? And they were just like, no, you got to go that direction, because a lot of people would decide for you where they think you're supposed to go based on the way you don't look like the people that used to have jobs like this all these past 50 years. So I think if you're now getting into positions, even at the most junior level, where you're starting to see candidates that are not diverse, I don't care if you're the intern or the assistant, ask yourself, what is wrong with this pool of candidates, and go back and see how you can impact change, and just do it, because you can. Everybody can. That's my recommendation.
That was great. Yeah, I really want to just keep talking to you guys. But it's time to wrap up. It's 12:30. So I wanted to thank you guys, thank everybody on the call. And I wanted to just say, stay curious. And I'm quoting Aziz, stay curious and be the change that you want to see. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Is that it? That's so sad. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Should we just log off?